Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Just wanted to welcome everybody to the 6th Stopwatch Session of the Charleston Conference. And we have our speakers here, and we're just going to get started. So, Wendy, please go ahead. And everybody, if you have questions for our speakers, we'll take those at the end of the stopwatches. So we'll get all of them taken care of, then hold on to those questions, write them down, and then we can talk with the speakers afterwards, after their presentations. So Wendy, let's see if we can get you going here.
Hello, everyone. I am Wendy Moore, and I am the Technical Services Librarian at Francis Marion University in Florence, South Carolina. Today, we will be discussing the lack of diversity in publishing, the equity, diversity, and inclusion of Black librarians and the state of publishing and librarianship. Although there is a lack of diversity in the library profession, there's also an issue in the lack of diversity in scholarly publication among academic librarians, in particular, African-American librarians. Scholarly communication can be thought of as the system through which research scholarship is created, evaluated, distributed, and preserved. And these are some examples of scholarly communication. We have scholarly journal articles, scholarly chapters or monographs of books and books themselves, conference proceedings, data sets, data visualizations, working papers, and blogs. A lack of diversity in academic fields, including the library fields, affects the diversity in scholars pursuing publication. In 2018, there were only 5.4% of African-American library professionals in higher education, 4% of African-Americans in the publishing industry overall, and 1.66% of African-American professionals published scholarly publications, and 5.46% of African-Americans were full-time university faculty. Now, this is a real problem in that if you do not publish, you do not get promotion and tenure, and researchers receive access or will not receive access to a range of scholarship possibilities. Now, what are the reasons for low scholarly publication? As we stated earlier, one of the reasons is the lack of diversity in the library field itself. And also politics and systemic racism, even though they are two different entities, they work hand in hand with each other. Some Black editors assert that publishers hold certain universal beliefs, and often stories of Black people do not fit into their equation. Many have stated that there has been some changes, and what has changed or not changed in the publishing field is that there is more diversity pertaining to what is being published in the African-American marketplace in terms of the variety of stories that are being told. However, there are, the editors also say that there are not many Black editors that have a whole lot of power. Some have power, but not enough to really make changes that are needed. Some Black editors have talked about certain microaggressions or macroaggressions that seem to go in the realm of publishing. There is also this narrow view of the contributions in this country by Blacks and other persons of color. For instance, some publishers have the preconceived idea that many readers will not see African Americans as leaders or in a positive light, Therefore, many manuscripts that do try to produce such material are go rejected. As an example, Carrie Greenwich, historian and author of Black Radical, The Life and Times of William Monroe Trotter, says that initially she was told that no one would publish the book unless it was about slavery or unless she was writing about the busing crisis. Many publishing companies have a narrow view of potential audiences and readers. Some Black editors have also heard Black books don't sell or Black people don't read. There's this whole dynamics of politics that also enable, or should I say dissuade, African-American librarians for publishing. So what are some resolutions? What can be done to change things? Many Blacks in the publishing profession feel that more Blacks and people of color should become involved in the business of publishing so that they can express themselves and change things and have a seat at the table. African Americans and others should get involved in the various initiatives that are trying to diversify publishing also. And these are some of those initiatives that are involved in solving the issue. And we're at the end. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Morag Stewart, an acquisitions librarian at the University of Washington Libraries, joined by Faye Christenberry, collection strategy and licensing librarian. Our co-presenter, Rebecca Doxford, was unable to join us for this recording, but will be available for questions. For the next 6 minutes or so, we'll describe the impact of the COVID pandemic on the University of Washington's streaming media acquisitions, policies, and practices. Take it away, Faye.
All right, well, first, a little background on how we have handled streaming media in the past. When DVDs were the only option available, we used a fair use model to purchase and digitize films for faculty. The only requirements were that we used legally attained copies and ensure the content was viewable but not downloadable. DVDs were digitized in-house and loaded on a local Helix Universal Media server. There were no limits on the number of titles digitized per class, and faculty were responsible for compliance with copyright law. This model was very popular with faculty and quickly became unsustainable due to staff workload and concern over emerging lawsuits claiming copyright infringement by ripping DVDs for course-related use. As licensed streaming content became available, we moved away from digitizing DVDs and purchased digital streaming license rights to host content on MediaAmp, later switching to Canopy. We also emphasized our role as facilitators, providing the information and tools faculty needed to digitize and host media on their own via Canvas or Google Drive. Due to the increasing cost of streaming licenses, we eventually limited the purchase to course reserves only and added other restrictions to reduce the strain on our budget. While there were many challenges to 2020, these affected how we dealt with our streaming media. With library buildings closed, there was no access to the physical collections, no mail receiving or staff to process new physical items. In addition, with campus closed and all courses being taught remotely, the demand for online content skyrocketed. The end result was that we ceased purchasing DVDs and had to rethink purchasing DVDs with digital streaming license options. Because the closures happened suddenly, faculty needed streaming content immediately, so we needed faster turnaround for purchasing, licensing, and uploading hosted content. Streaming requests almost doubled overall during the closure. Most of the titles were available through Canopy or Swank, but for the others, we had to figure out a new process for making the content available quickly. Of the 34 Seattle campus requests for titles not available through a streaming service, 22 were filled, and 12 were unfilled. Mostly this was due to the lack of an educational license. Others were only available through streaming services like Amazon or Netflix.
Thanks, Faye. With the move to remote learning, we had to immediately adapt our policies and procedures to meet the needs for spring quarter of 2020. Among these changes were loosening policy restrictions on the number of titles that could be requested per class, also removing the requirement of minimum course enrollment. Not buying DVDs meant DSL streaming orders were limited to vendors who could supply digital files. The turnaround time between sending a file to our hosting vendor and when it became available online had lengthened from about 1 to 2 weeks to a standard of 1 month, as most of our purchases are made within a few days to a few weeks before they are needed. This became unsustainable and we began investigating other hosting options. Additionally, some staff were unable to access our secure file storage from off campus. As we added more files for hosting streaming earlier in the pandemic, we maxed out the server space. Workarounds led to files stored in a number of different locations depending on which campus a streaming file was for. Selectors across our 3 campuses also wanted better information sharing to support streaming subscription renewals. In the hope of dealing with all of these issues, the acquisitions department began using Google Workspace for Education, or G Suite, to create shared drives for working documents and to store hosted streaming files awaiting upload. As a result, tracking streaming subscription renewals in a new shared spreadsheet available to everyone involved in streaming orders created a more transparent process and enabled us to replace a more cumbersome email renewal process. Permissions were easier to manage than our previous file storage solution and allowed for smoother interdepartmental collaboration with more stakeholders. With input from our preservation department, for example, we were able to incorporate a final step of centrally archiving digital files with licenses that allow this as part of our overall hosted streaming upload process, rather than have that as a separate workflow managed by individual campuses. Changes to workflows and the involvement of preservation led to the review of our sample license language for streaming vendors without licenses of their own. Updates to the sample license language now better reflect our needs for preservation of in perpetuity licensed material, support accessibility, and serve walk-in users. So where did that get us and where do we go from here? UW reopened for on-campus instruction this fall of 2021. For now, we are keeping the revised streaming policy as well as the new workflows. Better communication and involving preservation staff has opened up potential opportunities as well, such as in-house creation of caption files from DVDs. Moving forward, as we were buying fewer DVDs, we hope that more filmmakers and distributors will continue to provide digital files for hosting. We continue to test alternative hosting platforms, though it is rather like comparing apples and oranges. We hope for more standardization in these hosting platforms, particularly with regard to file formats that they support and more accessibility features to become standard, such as audio descriptions as well as captioning and transcription. That's all we have. Thanks for watching. We welcome questions during the Q&A or feel free to contact us by email. Thanks.
Welcome to the Stopwatch Session, the reality of serials inflation and the 2021 Periodicals Price Survey. I'm Sion Romaine, Director of Acquisitions for the University of Washington Libraries, and co-presenting with me today is Barbara Albee, Account Services Manager for EBSCO Information Services. Our agenda today includes the following. We'll talk about what the survey is, the indexes and methodology used in the survey, factors and themes that play a role in the forecast, the benefits of using the periodical price survey, and finally, the outcome inflation rates reported in the article. Since 1993, the annual Periodicals Price Survey has forecast the average increase in U.S. periodical subscription prices that will be charged to U.S. libraries for the upcoming year. Originally started as a partnership between EBSCO and Library Journal, the survey grew out of a need for oversight of serials inflation rates. Lee Van Orsdale and Kathleen Bourne oversaw the annual survey through 2009, with Steve Bosch from the University of Arizona and Kitty Henderson from EBSCO taking over as co-authors beginning in 2010. More recently, Barbara and I have taken over. EBSCO plays an active role in the survey since they provide pricing data. Historical pricing data provided by EBSCO is matched to large sets of periodical title lists from various indexes. The resulting data set, along with economic and industry trends, are then reviewed in order to generate the pricing predictions for the next renewal season. Methodology matters and is consistent year after year. The survey follows the guidelines of an ANSI NISO standard Z39.20, which gives the criteria for price indexes for print library materials. It describes how to prepare and compile price indexes to help measure the extent of price changes on a periodic basis for a variety of library materials. Indexes are selected to represent both different types of libraries, public versus academic, as well as show changes in pricing by subject or discipline. Title sets are combined in different ways to provide different views on the impact of serials inflation on libraries. Titles and indexes change from year to year. We account for the changes in each index and make note of changes in the article, and we use the most current title list available to us. Print pricing was preferred in early years of the article, but e-pricing has become predominant in the last 10 years. Multiple tables are created for the survey so that pricing trends can be observed for subject disciplines and for both academic libraries and public libraries. For discipline, the Clarivate Analytic Indexes, formerly ISI, are used, representing about 6,400 titles in our data sets. Content from the 5 major publishers, Elsevier, Springer Nature, Wiley, Taylor and Francis, and Sage, continues to represent more than half, 61%, of the titles in the merged Clarivate Analytics Indexes. For academic library interests, we take the Clarivate Indexes and add in EBSCO's Academic Search Ultimate, along with Scopus, Elsevier's Abstract and Citation Database, which is our largest data set with about 22,000 titles. We remove series, inactive titles, access only, and titles with no pricing information. EBSCO's Master File Complete gives us the public school library concentration. But coming up with a prediction for the price survey is more than just crunching numbers. We also review and watch for trends that may shape how publishers set pricing for the coming year. And Barbara will now talk about that aspect of the survey.
Many issues remain the same year after year. Shifts and developments in the economy and higher education and the subsequent effects those changes have on library budgets are constant. These are contributing factors for which we find overwhelming evidence in the literature. For over 20 years, we have seen library budgets, for the most part, flattening or diminishing, leaving libraries to battle cost inflation and revenue stagnation. There is usually one theme or issue that predominates or rises to the surface each year, and we try to run with that throughout the article. Open access, for example, was explored more closely in recent years. We also look at drivers in the market. These are some things we see on the horizon, such as budget compression, open access mandates, and less print. By the end of the year, there could be others that surface. These are certainly things we will consider, but we always look for the more critical issues of the year. One of our goals is to facilitate understanding of how and why libraries are changing and better position the library to meet the needs and expectations of their institutions and library users. The survey is one source for collection managers and acquisitions librarians to help predict the budget and discover trends. It is a valuable tool that can be used for a variety of purposes, such as for information gathering, research, and more widely for budget planning. Libraries use the survey to check inflation rates, do budget predictions and long-term planning, to assist in an inventory of collections, to determine the value of collections for insurance purposes, and to develop reports, whether administrative or financial. There are 10 tables in all in the survey. This sample is Table 2, Cost History by LCSH. Table 2 is probably one of the first places librarians look for the overall projected percentage of price increase. This table is based on the titles in the Scopus data set, which includes titles in general academic and public library collections and includes foreign and domestic publishers. We use the 2020 average cost per title in various subject areas compared to that of the 2021 average cost per title to give the projected overall percentage increase, which was between 3 and 4% for 2021. If a local serials portfolio tends to skew towards large publishers, then the increase for your library will be toward the 4% level. For comparison purposes, the rate of price increase is analyzed for more than 7,100 e-journal packages handled by EBSCO. Packages and a large part of the periodical expenditure in the marketplace, so the rate of price increase for these collections is important data. For 2020, the average rate of increase was 4.3%. The inflation rate for 2021 e-packages was 2.12%. This year's survey was titled The New Abnormal, Looking Past the Pandemic to the New Periodicals Landscape, and the article can be found in the April issue of Library Journal. For related reading, there is the annual U.S. Periodicals Price Index, or USPPI. And to reiterate, if you have not read the article, this year the inflation rates were at 3 to 4%, the lowest in a decade. This is due to a lot of factors, but the biggest being the effects of the pandemic on higher education and our industry. The reality is that cereals inflation is here to stay. Thank you.
All right, so we've got a few questions through chat that I'll go ahead and ask our speakers here. So Wendy, somebody says, could you please post your slides? They would like to see the initiatives shown at the end. You're muted. So Wendy, you're muted. You want to?
Okay, I will. I sure will.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then for University of Washington, can you talk more about providing transcription files in-house and how do you create them? That would be.
So I can try to take that one. We basically it's something that would be done by our preservation staff working from, and this would only also be for titles where we already own the DVD. So, you know, for instance, if there was, I think the only instance I know where we've done it already has been where the caption file wasn't separate or for whatever reason wasn't included with a digital file that we got for something that we were hosting. And since we had the DVD, we were able to essentially rip it in one way or another to create that caption file. I could check with our preservation staff as far as like what software. I'm assuming it's something like Handbrake, but I don't have the specifics right now, but I can certainly check on that.
Sounds good.
I can just add more.
Go ahead.
It is Handbrake. I sat in on a session that the preservation department did recently where they've had a bunch of students doing transcriptions for content from our special collections. And that was one of the products that they said they used.
So there's another question for you about the videos. What platform are you using to host your own videos?
Right now, we're kind of in the middle of a couple of different ones. We've historically hosted with Canopy, as was mentioned, and there was MediaAmp before that. Right now, we're trying out a couple of different options. We have the availability of hosting with Avon, since our consortium currently has an Avon subscription. But unfortunately, you know, just the longevity of that is sort of one of our issues with using that as a long-term hosting solution, since you have to have a subscription for that to continue. We've also tried MS Stream, since we have an Office 365 subscription here at the UW. It's, you know, it's worked fairly well. There, you know, it does have some auto transcripting features and things like that, but it's not without issue. Faye, if you want to chip in on that, but yeah. So as I say, we're kind of exploring, but we have the majority of our files in Canopy right now.
Right. Yes, we're definitely still looking to see what maybe a better solution would be. And a lot of it is just, you know, especially this last year, you know, faculty don't always give us the minimum 2 weeks notice that we need in order to get it available. And often it's even less than that. So that quick turnaround time to get the content up is key.
Yeah, faculty don't understand it. It might take a little bit of time. So I'm looking at there. Are there any questions from the in-house audience? Everybody? Okay. There's another one, still with the videos. This is a comment, I guess. It's so you ripped the captured file instead of a manual process? And not, I guess that's the question. I'm not sure if they might need to talk to somebody at your place more about that, right? I think Faye, or they're talking about the videos.
So in terms of the transcriptions?
Right. Yeah, let me see if they're still online. Selena, if you want to rethink your question or rephrase it, so maybe. Yeah.
Or if they want to contact us directly.
Yeah.
We can double check with the preservation department and see exactly how they did that.
Great. Yeah. All right. So on the pricing index, guys, how long does that process take to get done? That's it looks like a long time. Do you start on it like what time of a year do they really get started on it?
It's actually a year-long process.
I was about to say, you start on it the day after. It's like we work on the conference after we start.
Pretty much. We have deadlines that are in place. Sean may want to comment, but we do research throughout the year, keep in touch with one another about the trends and what we're seeing. We actually don't start working on the data until the fall. So we're just starting to work together on that.
Great. Well, anybody have any questions? I'm looking around the room. They're okay. I think
it's curious to know what other people are using for hosting for video. That's
okay. That's a good question. I'm trying to read the chat to see, make sure we don't miss anything. Okay, here we go. Here's one. What streaming solutions do you recommend now?
well, I can just say, at least in terms of what happened this past year for us, I think what's fairly typical is that about a third of what we get for course reserves is from Swank, and another third is from Canopy. So those two providers are very popular with faculty, and that's great because we can, it's a very quick process and a quick turnaround time. We also use Alexander Street Press. We have some DocuSeek titles. It's just when it comes to that hosted part that it gets a little tricky for us.
Right. That always seemed to be the question when I was working in that area. Well, I think that should do it for us. Thank the audience for being here and the virtual audience. And I'm going to check one more time to make sure I've got any other questions. I think that's good. So thank you guys. And thank you. I'm going to stop the recording now.